wake up, it's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., this is that source for anti-capitalist news and analysis. I'm that host, Sam Sachs, and it's That Friday Show. Good morning to everyone, especially that Chinese spy balloon over Montana. Now, that's some fun news you don't hear every day. Some people are freaked out by this, but not me. I welcome it. The balloon is reportedly moving southeast, so maybe, just maybe, it'll pass over D.C., and if it does, I'm going to be like Tiffany in Independence Day and stand on top of a building with a sign that reads, "Hey, make yourself at home." Maybe the other side will read, "Help us." And we begin on Capitol Hill, where on Thursday, House Republicans voted to remove Representative Ilhan Omar from the Foreign Affairs Committee. They claim that Omar can't serve on the committee because she previously made anti-Semitic comments, which of course is not true. She has criticized Israel before, that is true, but often in displaying their own anti-Semitism, lawmakers from both parties equate criticism of Israel with criticism of Judaism. This, of course, has nothing to do with alleged anti-Semitic comments. What it has to do with is Republicans who are subservient to the apartheid government in Israel kicking off a Muslim woman from a powerful committee because she's been willing in the past to challenge U.S. aid to Israel. She's also used her voice on the Foreign Affairs Committee to challenge other U.S. imperial activities, like back in 2019 when she dragged then envoy to Venezuela, Elliot Abrams, who was trying to do a coup in that country at the time, for his prior imperialist activities in the region.
In 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question.
That
was not a question. I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February 8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation.
That right there is a big part of why Republicans were so determined to kick Omar off her committee. Comments she made years ago and apologized for really have nothing to do with this. That's just the pretext. Democrats presented a united front in defense of Omar. Not a single one joined with Republicans to vote to kick her off the committee. But that solidarity immediately collapsed after the vote. I'm talking just minutes after the vote, when Republican Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar put forward a resolution to, quote, condemn the horrors of socialism, and got more than 100 Democrats to cross party lines and join the GOP to vote for it, including the leader of the House Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries, and so-called self-identified, I should say, progressive Ro Khanna. So, right after fascists and racists and imperialists in the Republican Party attacked and stripped Ilhan Omar of her committee assignment, Democrats rushed to their side to condemn socialism, an ideology that several members of the Democratic caucus subscribe to, or I should say claim to subscribe to, democratic socialism at least, which is also how Bernie Sanders describes himself, who Ro Khanna previously endorsed and was the co-chair of the election campaign. Jesus. Just yet another pathetic display from liberals in Congress. Good luck realigning this party when it can't be counted on to do just the most basic shit, like not fall for GOP bait bills. I do think it's pretty funny, though, why Republicans felt the need to bring this resolution condemning socialism to the floor. Here was Rep. Salazar explaining it.
And why am I bringing this resolution to the floor of the United States House of Representatives? Because young people in America are being brainwashed by the news media and academia into believing that socialism is an economic model for the greater good of all Americans. And the problem is that they're falling for it. They're believing it. And here's the proof. Almost 40% of Gen Z and millennials think the Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx, the father of Marxism, is a better defense of freedom and equality than the Declaration of Independence.
Haha, that whips. It's also undeniably true. And I like to think that we're doing our little part here at MMN to make this transformation happen. Another oil company posted record profits last year. Shell announced that it made almost $40 billion in 2022. That's an all-time high, and it's double the amount of profit it earned the year before. The company joins other death merchants, posting record profits, including ExxonMobil, which made over $59 billion last year, and Chevron, which made more than $36 billion. High energy prices and new markets for natural gas in Europe, as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, helped boost energy firm earnings. But don't expect that money to be invested in lowering energy prices or transitioning to renewables. Nope, it's going right back into the pockets of capitalists. Shell said it will initiate a $4 billion stock buyback program to enrich shareholders. Last year, Shell paid out $26 billion to investors, which was more than the company put toward its renewable energy operations. Because making sure a handful of rich people get even richer is far more important than safeguarding a planet for future generations. Shell's profits last year were more than the GDP of Latvia. Yep, these motherfuckers are posting top 100 economy in the world numbers in just a single year of profits. It's astounding. And it's important to put all this profit news in context with other events happening, particularly in the Western United States, which is on the verge of a water war. As a result of climate change, the Colorado River is drying up, and that's bad because the river provides electricity and water for some 40 million people across 7 states in the region. And this week, one of those states, California, put forward a proposal for how to reduce water usage. But their plan is currently at odds with a separate proposal agreed to by 6 other states to reduce water consumption. California officials claim that that plan is unfair to their state. The Interior Department and the Bureau of Reclamation will now consider the proposals and put forward new rules for dealing with the future water shortages out west. But hey, enjoy the profits, Shell. A group of senators wrote a letter to the Pentagon and the Department of Education looking for answers on the junior ROTC program. An investigation by the New York Times last year found that instead of offering the military training classes as a volunteer program for students to enroll in, many schools are mandating students take it, which comes with all sorts of problems. ROTC stands for Reserve Officers Training Corps, and the program is offered at some 3,500 public high schools around the country, and it's aimed at pushing students toward a military career. But the Times found that, quote, dozens of schools have made the program mandatory or steered more than 75% of students in a single grade into the classes, including schools in Detroit, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Oklahoma City, and Mobile, Alabama. The vast majority of the schools with those high enrollment numbers were attended by a large proportion of non-white students and those from low-income households. Now, this would cut against the all-volunteer nature of the U.S. military and against the stated guidelines of the ROTC program. By forcing kids into the program, you're basically conscripting them. Senators Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Ron Wyden, and Mazie Hirono wrote in their letter, quote, the Times investigation raises concerns that the implementation of this program may be violating students' civil rights by forcing them into the JROTC program and its mandatory requirements. Those requirements often include dress codes and hair restrictions that discriminate against certain races. It's also troubling because ROTC classes have long been criticized for relying on outdated textbooks that enforce certain gender norms and that also whitewash prior acts committed by the U.S. government. On top of all that, it's been reported that JROTC instructors sought funding from the NRA for marksmanship programs and in return promised to promote the gun organization on school campuses. Somehow it gets even worse. Forcing kids into junior ROTC programs is literally putting them in harm's way. The senators note in their letter, quote, mandatory participation in JROTC is also troubling given reports of JROTC instructors sexually assaulting students. That's in reference to a separate New York Times investigation that found 33 JROTC instructors have been criminally charged with sexual misconduct against students. That's a far higher rate of abuse than among civilian high school teachers. And the Pentagon would later admit to Congress that it was aware of more than 60 allegations of abuse and harassment by JROTC instructors. Senators are demanding answers into what sort of oversight of the JROTC program is in place at the Pentagon and Department of Education. They've given the departments until February 15th to respond. JROTC shouldn't exist in the first place. It's sick enough that the military is allowed to even recruit in high schools.
The hunt is fucking on. Everybody goes to jail.
There's more officers than there are protesters.
Turn over.
Stop resisting! No basic, it's not necessary!
They got a girl choked up. Come on, man, she can't breathe.
My glasses, fuck your glass!
Anybody need a medic?
Now time for the most important work we do around here, naming a rich dick. Let's check out those nominations on social media. Rona putting forward a goddamn landlord, and not just any goddamn landlord, but one who is trying to evict a pregnant woman a week before her due date. Wow. Just when you thought landlords couldn't get any worse, you hear a story like this. Awful. Next up, here's a surprising one. Steph Curry. He's nominated for pulling some NIMBY crap and opposing the construction of a multifamily affordable apartment building in his neighborhood. That sucks. Let's also not forget that Curry used to also be a shill for crypto. Come on, man. Here's a strong nomination. It's for the owners of Warrior Met Coal, who still refuse to negotiate with their workers, who've now been on strike for nearly 3 frickin' years. Can't forget about those miners. They're an inspiration. Their bosses, not so much. Classic rich dicks. Here's a nomination for Mr. Beast. I'd like to speak more on that, but I'm committed to never learning who this guy is. That's been tested this week, but I'm still not looking into it. Don't have time. But thanks for the nomination. Finally, here's a nomination for BDG CEO Brian Goldberg for shutting down the new Gawker and laying off a bunch of writers. He claimed the company needed to, quote, prioritize its better monetized websites. Goldberg is such a rich asshole that he spent $1.4 million at an auction recently to buy a hat that belonged to Napoleon. Not something I can relate to. What a prick. All right, thanks for all the suggestions. But in the end, this week's rich dick is Netflix. Thanks to Sunny Phone Show for, again, nailing the nomination. The streaming giant announced a major crackdown on password sharing. It's already implemented restrictions in other countries and will likely roll them out in the US by the end of March. And after they do, A Netflix account holder will only be able to access the service in a single household. Anyone else not using that same IP address will be blocked. They'll have to buy their own account. And you'll have to log into your account from your own household every 30 days to avoid getting locked out. It's all really stupid stuff and a classic rich dick move from a company that has more than 230 million paying subscribers around the world. And I don't know, but for the crummy content they've been putting out lately, the monthly fee should cover a couple extra friends and family too. I'm not paying almost $20 a month to watch the new season of Emily in Paris or some rich dipshit eat fancy food all over the world. In fact, I don't even know what I'm paying $20 for now. Reruns of the British Bake Off, maybe? It was only 6 years ago that Netflix encouraged its users to share their password. In a tweet, it said, quote, "Love is sharing a password." Well, that's awkward now. I guess you got to go tell that person you love that they need to get their own damn Netflix account now. The important thing to remember here is that Netflix is profitable. Last year, it brought in over $31 billion, and after paying out all labor and server costs and other expenses, it netted $4.5 billion. It ain't losing money, it's making money, billions each year. But the funny thing about capitalism is that profit accumulation isn't enough. There has to be continuous profit growth. People investing in the company today want to make sure they get the same returns as those who did a decade ago, and so there is always pressure to grow profits. Netflix made $4.5 billion last year in profits, but that was slightly less than it made in profits the year before, 12% less. And so it's time to squeeze the users. I mean, the company could invest in better content to naturally grow subscribers, but no, they're going to fuck with user experience and try to wring a couple $1 billion out of each of us. And that's why capitalism sucks and will eventually destroy everything it creates, including the world, although it didn't create that. Of course, we know what's going to happen next. The other streaming sites will do the same, all because some assholes at Netflix aren't satisfied with $4 billion in profit a year. They want 5, then 6 billion, then 7, then 8, then 9 billion. It's a sickness. Now I just got to remember how to torrent again. Netflix, this week's Rich Dicks. Wrapping the show up this week with a sunrise from right here in Washington, D.C. It was sent in by Chase in Northeast, who wanted me to give a shout out to the local IWW chapter. Of course, I'm happy to do. Enjoy. Thanks, Chase. Show's over. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels if you haven't already. One day, capitalism will fall. Until then, we're going to be right here. See you next week.